Snow hammered against the windows of Astoria Court when the investor raised his voice across the dining room. Crystal glasses rattled, conversations froze, and a young waitress with trembling hands tried to steady a tray she could barely hold. Emily Rivera had endured insults before, but nothing like the moment an influential Arab investor mocked her accent in front of everyone. What none of them expected was the owner stepping forward, calm, steady, almost haunted, before saying the words that silenced the entire restaurant. "She's my partner." From that moment, secrets long buried, a hidden past, and a truth powerful enough to break or rebuild a family began to surface. This emotional story reveals how a single moment of humiliation opened the door to second chances, redemption, and a bond neither of them were prepared to face. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. The chandeliers of Astoria Court cast a soft golden light over the crowded dining room, a warm contrast to the snow-heavy New York night pressing against the tall windows. Jazz floated through the air, the kind that made people speak in low voices as waiters weaved between tables. Near the kitchen door, Emily Rivera tightened her grip on a silver tray. Her vest was slightly too big, her collar too stiff, and her nerves too loud. She repeated her practiced line under her breath, smoothing the faint Puerto Rican lilt she had never fully managed to hide. The floor manager leaned close. "Table 12, VIP, investor from the Middle East. Please be careful." He didn't say with your accent, but Emily heard it anyway. She lifted the tray and crossed the dining room, passing businessmen, wealthy couples, and a framed photograph of the restaurant's early days, a tiny community spot near a bus stop in New York. The caption read, "A heartwarming story of second chances." She used to like that line. Tonight it felt distant. Table 12 sat behind a frosted glass divider. At its head was a man dressed in a white thobe and black agal, posture relaxed but commanding. Khalid al-Hariri, the Arab investor rumored to be considering several New York properties. Two executives flanked him, and across from them sat Robert Kingsley, Astoria Court's silver-haired owner, calm and observant. Emily stopped beside the table and steadied her breath. "Good evening," she began softly. "My name is Emily. I'll be your server tonight. Would you like still or sparkling?" Khalid's head lifted sharply. "Say again?" She repeated the line, slower this time. His eyes narrowed with interest, not the polite kind. "You're English," he said. "Where are you from?" "I was born in Queens. My parents are from Puerto Rico," she answered, hearing the slight roll of her R and wishing she could swallow it back. Khalid gave a short laugh. "Ah, Queens. That explains. In my country, a place like this trains staff to speak properly." He waved a hand at her mouth as though brushing away dust. One executive chuckled nervously. The other pretended to study his menu. Emily's chest tightened. The glasses on the tray clinked from the tension in her hands. "Would you prefer still or sparkling water, sir?" she asked quietly. "Maybe first you learn to say it without that accent," he replied, amused. Nearby diners glanced over. The air shifted. Robert's chair scraped lightly as he stood. His expression had sharpened, warmth replaced by something steadier. He stepped closer to Emily, positioning himself between her and the investor's smirk. "Khalid," Robert said evenly, "before you continue commenting on how she speaks, there's something you should know about Emily." Emily's breath caught. The entire table stilled. For a heartbeat, no one at the table moved. The jazz faded into the background as if the entire restaurant leaned closer to hear what Robert would say next. Khalid's brows lifted. "Something I should know?" he repeated, tone edged with disbelief. "About her." Emily froze, pulse thudding against her ribs. Robert had defended staff before, but never like this. Never with that quiet steel in his voice. "Yes," Robert said. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes held firm. "Emily isn't just a waitress here." Khalid let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Please, don't insult me with stories meant to soften my reaction." Robert didn't flinch. "She's my partner." The word cracked the air like a dropped glass. Emily nearly lost her grip on the tray. "You're what?" The whisper slipped out before she could stop it. The executives exchanged bewildered looks. One leaned forward slightly, as though trying to decide whether he had misheard. Khalid's expression tightened, amusement slipping toward irritation. "Partner?" he repeated slowly. "You mean business partner?" Robert nodded once. "That's correct." Emily stared at him, heat rising behind her eyes. Not from embarrassment, but confusion tangled with something she couldn't name. Why would he say that? Why now? Khalid scoffed. "She carries trays. She stumbles over words. And you expect me to believe she owns part of this establishment?" Robert's tone didn't waver. "Believe it or not, Emily helped build this place. The early years were difficult, but she stood by the business when most people would have walked away." Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She barely understood the words herself. Robert gently slid 2 glasses from her trembling tray and placed them on the table, an act that steadied the moment without drawing attention. Khalid crossed his arms, studying Robert as though reassessing him. "So this is what you call negotiation? Turning a waitress into a partner to win sympathy?" Robert's jaw tightened. "This isn't negotiation. It's respect." Silence thickened. Even the nearby tables had gone still. Khalid finally exhaled, defeated more by pride than by the argument. "Fine," he muttered. Still water. Emily poured carefully, though her hand still trembled. When she stepped away from the table, Robert gently touched her elbow. "Emily," he murmured low enough that only she heard, "come to my office after this." Her breath hitched. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said softly. "There's something you deserve to know." She nodded and walked toward the service station, heart pounding harder with each step. Whatever Robert had begun tonight wasn't small, and it wasn't over. The hallway leading to Robert's office was narrower than the grand dining room, lit only by a row of dim sconces that cast long shadows along the floor. Emily walked slowly, her fingers brushing the wall to steady herself. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking plates, murmured conversations. The distant scrape of chairs faded behind her as the air cooled and quieted. At the end of the corridor, Robert's door stood half open. A thin line of warm light spilled across the carpet. She hesitated, tray tucked against her hip, pulse echoing in her ears. Robert had defended her before, yes, but never with that mysterious conviction, never calling her something she had never been. Partner. She tapped gently. "Mr. Kingsley, you wanted to see me?" Robert looked up from behind his desk. The office was cozy, dark wood, shelves of cookbooks, a framed photo of a tiny street-front cafe that had existed long before Astoria Court became a magnet for wealthy clients. Robert's silver hair caught the lamplight, highlighting the tired lines beneath his eyes. "Emily," he said softly. "Come in." Close the door. She obeyed, then stood stiffly, arms crossed behind her back the way new servers were trained. "If I did something wrong at the table—" "You didn't," he gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." She did, though her shoulders remained tense. "Why did you say that? In front of everyone?" Robert breathed out slowly, as if sorting through memories before speaking. "Because it was time," he said, "and because you were being humiliated in my restaurant. I wasn't going to let that continue." Her throat tightened. "But, partner—" Robert leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Emily, you've been with me since the early days, since before we even had a real kitchen. You remember what this place was, just a rented space near a community center, a barely functioning stove, and a dream that was too big for one person." She lowered her gaze, recalling the long nights cleaning grease off second-hand pans, the cold winter shifts where the heat barely worked. The small act of kindness Robert had shown her when she first applied, hiring her on the spot, despite her nervous English. "You kept me going," Robert continued. "You believed in this place when no investor cared. Even when I didn't have money for payroll, you stayed. You even loaned part of your own savings to keep us open." Emily's eyes widened. I didn't do that to be a partner. I did that because this place felt like home." Robert smiled faintly. "Which is exactly why I included your name in the partnership papers last year." She blinked. "You... what?" A folder sat on his desk, edges neat, a yellow tab marking a page inside. She recognized it instantly. Legal documents. Her breath caught as Robert rested a hand over it. "Emily," he said gently, You're more part of this place than you know. But there's something else you should understand. Something I've kept from you far too long." Emily's heartbeat quickened. The folder seemed to pulse under the lamplight. She whispered, "What is it?" Before Robert could answer, a knock sounded sharply on the door, interrupting everything. The knock wasn't polite or hesitant. It landed on the door like someone claiming space that wasn't theirs. Robert straightened, the calm in his expression dimming. Emily sat rigid in her chair, fingers curling around the seat's edge. "Come in," Robert said carefully. The door swung open, and Khalid al-Hariri stepped inside, the folds of his white thobe brushing against the doorway. He didn't wait for permission. The warmth of the office seemed to shrink around his presence. "Mr. Kingsley," he said, his voice steady but edged with annoyance. "I believe we have unfinished business." Robert rose from his chair with quiet authority. "This is a private conversation." Khalid waved a dismissive hand. Yes, I imagine it is. Especially after the little story you told at my table." His gaze slid toward Emily, lingering longer than necessary. "Your partner." Emily swallowed hard, fighting the urge to look away. Robert stepped subtly between them. "If you're here to continue insulting my staff, I suggest you return to your table or leave." "My staff," Khalid repeated slowly, almost tasting the words. "But you said she's more than staff, a partner. Yet she dresses like a waitress, works like a waitress." His brow arched. "Is this some kind of American joke?" Emily felt heat rising in her chest, not shame, but something closer to anger. Her hands trembled in her lap. Robert's voice remained calm. "It isn't a joke." Khalid exhaled, impatient. "Fine. Then perhaps you can explain why someone who cannot even pronounce simple English words correctly is suitable to represent your business." Emily stiffened. The words hit harder in the small room without the clatter of dishes or whispering guests to muffle them. Robert's eyes sharpened. "Watch your tone." Khalid's expression darkened. "I am here as a potential investor. I am evaluating professionalism. If that offends you, perhaps you are not ready for the scale of partnership I offer." Robert leaned slightly forward. "If having an accent disqualifies someone in your eyes, then no. Your partnership is not one I want." Emily's breath caught. Khalid stared at Robert, surprise flickering across his features. He had not expected resistance, not here. "You would reject my investment for her?" Robert didn't look away. "I would reject any investment that comes at the cost of someone's dignity." Silence pressed heavily against the walls. For the first time, Khalid glanced at Emily, not with amusement, but with something like calculation, uncertain, unsettled. He stepped back toward the door. "We will speak again," he said tersely. "But this conversation is not finished." When he left, the door clicked shut with a finality that echoed in Emily's ribs. Robert turned to her. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, though her voice trembled. Why are you risking so much because of me?" Robert hesitated, then rested a hand on the folder on his desk. "Because what's inside here," he said quietly, "is something that ties us together far more than business ever could." The room chilled. Emily's stomach tightened. "Robert," she whispered, "what's in that folder?" Robert slowly opened the folder, the soft rustle of paper sounding impossibly loud in the quiet office. Emily leaned forward, palms damp against her knees. Her breath shortened without her permission. Inside the folder wasn't a contract, but a photograph. He turned it toward her. A younger Emily stood in the picture, maybe 8 or 9 years old, hair in 2 messy braids, wearing a second-hand jacket 2 sizes too big. She was standing outside a community center, clinging to a small lunchbox. Snowflakes blurred the edges of the photo, as if time itself had been cold that day. Emily frowned. "I don't understand." Robert's voice softened. "This was taken the winter the community kitchen flooded. Do you remember that storm?" She nodded slowly. "My mom took me and my brother to get food that day. The volunteers told us the kitchen had closed. We went home hungry." Her voice cracked lightly. "I haven't thought of that in years." Robert held her gaze. There was something fragile in his expression. "That day, I was there, Emily." She blinked. "You?" He nodded. Before Astoria Court existed, I volunteered there. I cleaned floors, chopped vegetables, anything they needed. When the storm hit and the pipes burst, everyone panicked. Families were turned away, but you... He tapped the edge of the photo with a trembling finger. You stayed by the door for almost an hour, holding that lunchbox, refusing to leave because you wanted to save food for your little brother. Heat rose behind Emily's eyes. The memory, once blurred by years of struggle, came back in flashes. The cold biting her cheeks, the trembling in her hands, the disappointment in her mother's voice. You walked up to me, Robert continued quietly, and asked if I knew how to fix pipes. His smile was faint, nostalgic. I did. So I fixed them. And the kitchen reopened that same night. Emily covered her mouth, breathing unsteadily. I remember someone helping, but I didn't know it was you. Robert's voice lowered. That moment changed my life. Seeing a little girl so determined to take care of someone else. It shifted something in me. It planted the idea for what later became Astoria Court, a place built around dignity, second chances, and kindness. Her throat tightened. And when you walked into my restaurant years later asking for a job, Robert said, I recognized you immediately. Emily's breath caught. Why didn't you ever tell me? His eyes softened with something deep, almost painful. Because I wanted you to grow here for who you are, not because you inspired me once. Emily's chest ached with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and confusion. But that's not the only thing in this folder, Robert said quietly. From beneath the photograph, he pulled out a printed email, and Emily saw her own name in the subject line. Her stomach dropped. What is that? She whispered. Before Robert could answer, the office door burst open. This time, it wasn't Khalid. It was the floor manager, face pale, breath short. Robert, Emily, you need to come. Now. There's a problem at table 12. Emily stared at the copy of the birth certificate as if it were glowing. Her name, her mother's name, and a blank space where father should have been. A void she had learned to ignore growing up, a silence her mother never filled. Her hands trembled as she lifted the paper. Why are you showing me this? Robert moved slowly around the desk, not wanting to crowd her. Because your mother didn't list the father, he said quietly. But I recognized the date, and the timing, and the last conversation we had before she disappeared from my life. Emily swallowed hard. Are you saying... I'm saying I don't know for certain, he replied, voice steady but fragile around the edges. I never had the courage to ask her, and she never reached out again. His breath shook faintly. But when you first walked into this restaurant, when you spoke, when you moved, something felt familiar, something I couldn't ignore. Emily shook her head, stunned. Robert, that doesn't make sense. You're not... The word wouldn't leave her throat. He didn't finish the sentence for her. He simply sat in the chair opposite her, hands folded tightly. I'm not claiming anything, I have no right to. But I knew your mother. I cared for her. And I failed her when she needed someone. When I saw you struggling alone, working 2 jobs, living with your little brother in that cramped apartment, I couldn't stand by again. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. Her breath came uneven, broken. So, you put my name on partnership papers? Out of guilt? Out of responsibility, Robert whispered. Out of a promise I made to myself years ago that if life ever gave me a chance to undo the harm I caused, I would take it, even if it cost me everything. Her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, fighting back the sting. A long silence settled in the office, heavy, uncertain, filled with ghosts neither of them had expected to confront tonight. Emily felt the old ache in her chest, the one built from years of pretending she didn't care who her father was, pretending her mother hadn't carried that secret like a stone in her heart. A sudden knock echoed against the doorframe. Both turned. The floor manager stood there, breathless. Robert, sorry to interrupt, but you need to come out front. Robert frowned. Is something wrong? The manager swallowed hard. It's the investor, Khalid. He's causing a scene. Emily's stomach dropped. The manager added, voice low with tension. He's demanding to speak to both of you. When Emily and Robert stepped out of the hallway, The atmosphere in the dining room had shifted. Conversations were no longer smooth and warm. They were tight, fragmented, whispered. Chairs scraped softly. Guests leaned slightly toward the center of the room, sensing the tension the way animals sense an approaching storm. Khalid stood near the entrance, no longer seated at his table. His thobe was immaculate, but his composure had cracked. His expression carried irritation sharpened into something colder. Two of the servers hovered nervously nearby, unsure whether to intervene. Robert approached with calm steps. Emily followed, though her pulse thundered beneath her ribs. She kept her hands clasped behind her back so no one would see them shaking. "Khalid," Robert said evenly, "you asked for us." Khalid turned. His eyes scanned Robert first, then Emily, landing on her with a new intensity. Less mocking, more analytical, as if trying to piece together a puzzle he hadn't realized existed. "Yes," he said, straightening. "I believe there are things we need to discuss before I finalize any decisions tonight." Emily felt Robert's presence beside her, a quiet anchor. She stood taller. One of the executives from earlier hurried over, whispering urgently, "Khalid, maybe we should move this to a private—" "No." Khalid lifted a hand. "This concerns everyone who does business with this place." An uncomfortable ripple went through the room. Someone at a nearby table cleared their throat. Another pretended to check their phone, but didn't look away. Robert's voice remained controlled. "Then speak." Khalid exhaled slowly, as though choosing his words with care. "I reacted poorly earlier," he admitted. His gaze flicked briefly toward Emily. "Perhaps too sharply. But I do not appreciate being misled." Robert frowned. "Misled? You claim she is your partner," Khalid said. "Yet she is dressed as a waitress, working as one. And now I learn," he paused, studying them, "that there are personal complications involved." Emily's chest tightened. "Personal?" Khalid tilted his head. "I saw the folder on your desk when I came to your office door earlier." His tone cooled. "Birth documents, papers, a relationship between you two that was not disclosed." Emily felt her breath catch. Robert's jaw clenched. "That was private." "Business requires transparency," Khalid snapped softly. "If you expect me to invest millions, I deserve to know whether your decisions are compromised by sentiment." Emily felt something flare in her chest, something fierce. She stepped forward before she could think. "My accent isn't a liability," she said quietly, "and neither is whatever history Robert had with my mother." A hush fell. Even the music seemed to dim. Khalid studied her, expression unreadable. Robert placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Emily." But Emily didn't look away from the investor. "You want to judge professionalism?" she said, voice trembling but brave. "Then judge my work. Judge my service. Judge the nights I kept this place running when we only had 3 employees." Her breath shook. "But don't judge where I come from." The words hovered in the room like a flame. Khalid didn't respond, not immediately. His silence held weight. Then, without warning, he said quietly, "I want to hear the full truth, all of it." His gaze moved from Robert to Emily, right now. The room seemed to contract around them. Tables, walls, chandeliers, all leaning in as if the entire restaurant had taken one collective breath. Emily felt dozens of eyes on her, but strangely it no longer frightened her. The uncertainty in Khalid's gaze, the tension in Robert's jaw, the weight of the folder still echoing in her mind, all of it pushed her forward rather than pulling her down. Robert took one step ahead of her, as though instinctively trying to shield her from the attention. "Khalid, the truth you're asking for is personal, deeply personal, and it has nothing to do with business." Khalid clasped his hands behind his back. "Everything affects business, especially secrets." Emily's voice came before she fully meant to speak. "It's not a secret, it's just complicated." Khalid's focus landed on her. "Then explain." The moment stretched. Emily inhaled slowly, gathering courage the way she had learned to gather shattered plates piece by piece with steady hands. "My mother raised me and my little brother alone," she said. "She never talked about the past, never mentioned anyone she trusted, and she definitely never said who my father was." Her throat tightened, but she kept going. Robert knew her, a long time ago before I was born, and tonight I found out he might have been someone important to her. The dining room remained painfully silent. Khalid's eyes flickered, not with mockery this time, but with something sharper: curiosity, calculation, maybe even empathy hidden beneath layers of pride. "So he could be your father?" Khalid asked bluntly. Gasps rose from nearby tables. Emily's breath trembled. "We don't know." Robert stepped in, his voice low but firm. "And until we do, it remains between us. This has no impact on how I run my business, nor on Emily's role here." Khalid studied them both, the lines around his eyes tightening. "But you put her name on partnership documents." Emily felt heat rise beneath her skin. The room watched like a courtroom. Robert nodded. "I did. To protect her," Khalid pressed. "Or because you feel responsible?" Robert hesitated, and that hesitation revealed more than any explanation could have. Emily's heart clenched. Khalid's voice softened just barely. "You think you can repair the past by elevating her in the present." Robert's gaze dropped briefly. "I'm trying not to fail twice." A crack formed in Emily's composure. She clenched her fists at her sides, voice wavering. "I didn't ask for any of this. I never asked to be protected. I just wanted to work. To take care of my brother. To survive." Khalid's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. Then he said something none of them expected. "What if I told you I understand more than you think?" Robert stiffened. "What do you mean?" Khalid exhaled, slow and heavy. "Because I too know what it means to carry shame tied to family, and to be judged for an accent that was never mine to choose." The room fell still again, but this time the silence felt different. Parte 9. For the first time since the tension began, Khalid's posture shifted, not with arrogance but with something heavier, something unexpectedly human. His shoulders lowered slightly, and his gaze dropped to the polished floor before he looked up again. "When I was 14, he said slowly, "my family sent me to study in London. They believed it would make me stronger, smarter, worthy of the expectations placed on me." His jaw tightened. "But when I arrived, my accent was thick. My English was broken, and every single day I was reminded of it." Emily's breath caught. She hadn't expected vulnerability, not from him. Khalid continued. "My classmates mocked the way I spoke. Teachers corrected me harshly. People laughed when I tried to pronounce simple words." He paused, the memory darkening his features. "Eventually I learned to hide it, to speak like them, to mimic their voices until no one knew where I came from." He exhaled unsteadily. "But losing that part of myself, it cost me something I never got back." Emily felt her throat tighten. Robert, too, softened, his shoulders easing. Khalid's voice dropped. "So, when I heard your accent, Emily, I reacted. Not because it was wrong," he swallowed, "but because it reminded me of what I had been forced to erase." The room's atmosphere changed. The judgment that had filled the air drained away, replaced by something quieter, warmer. Emily took a small step toward him. "Then why did you mock me?" Khalid's gaze met hers, steady, regretful. "Because shame makes fools of people who should know better." He paused. "And tonight, I was a fool." Her chest constricted, not with anger, but with a strange, unexpected understanding. Khalid looked toward Robert. "And you, hiding this connection, this uncertainty about who she might be, I know what it is to carry a truth that could break everything around you." Robert's voice was almost a whisper. "I was afraid. Afraid of losing her trust if she ever found out from someone else. Afraid of reopening wounds I didn't know how to face." Khalid nodded slowly. "Families are complicated. Honor, shame, expectations, they shape us." Emily glanced between the two men, one who had failed her mother in the past and one who had judged her too quickly tonight. Both flawed, both trying. She took a breath, grounding herself. "What happens now?" Khalid looked directly at her. "Now," he said quietly, "I ask you a question, not as an investor, but as a man who once lost himself trying to impress the world." Emily waited. "Do you want the truth about who your father is?" he asked. "Or are you afraid of what it might change?" Emily's chest tightened. Her hands trembled. Because for the first time, She didn't know the answer. Emily felt the weight of Khalid's questions settle over her like the snowfall outside. Silent, cold, and strangely beautiful. The truth. The one thing she'd spent her whole life pretending didn't matter. The thing she feared would break something inside her if she ever touched it. Her voice came out soft. I don't know. Khalid nodded, as though he understood that uncertainty better than anyone else in the room. Truth can be painful, he said, but silence can be worse. Robert watched her with an expression she'd never seen on him before. A mixture of fear and hope, a man bracing himself for a verdict that could reshape both of their lives. Emily took a slow breath. I grew up watching my mother hold everything together with nothing, she said. I learned how to work hard because I had no choice. I learned English from neighbors. I learned to raise my little brother like a parent. And all that time, it never mattered who my father was. Her voice cracked. But now, maybe it does. Robert stepped closer, careful, like approaching something fragile. Emily, whatever you decide, you're not alone. She closed her eyes briefly. That sentence, simple, quiet, steady, did something to her chest. Something warm, something terrifying. When she looked at him again, her eyes shimmered. If we find out the truth, and it's not you, what then? Robert swallowed. Then I'll still care for you, and I'll still be here. A beat passed. I'm not trying to replace anything you lost. I'm trying to be what I should have been a long time ago. The restaurant around them exhaled softly, the tension easing like a tide pulling back from shore. Khalid's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, hesitated, then silenced it. There is one more thing I should say before I leave, he murmured. Your accent, Emily. It is not a flaw. He paused. It is a story, and people forget that stories are power. Emily's chest warmed unexpectedly. She nodded, a small, grateful gesture. Khalid's expression softened for the first time all night. For what it's worth, I apologize. The entire dining room seemed to shift, respect replacing curiosity. He turned to Robert. If you still want a meeting tomorrow, I will come, but this time with a different heart. Robert inclined his head. We'll talk. Khalid walked toward the exit, his figure cutting through the restaurant like the last line of a tense chapter. The doors opened, letting in a gust of cold winter air before closing behind him. Emily stood still, breath trembling, eyes on the documents in her hand. Emily, Robert said gently, we don't have to decide anything tonight. She looked at him, truly looked. A man trying to mend what life had cracked open. A man who might be tied to her story in ways she hadn't imagined. Her voice was barely a whisper. Tomorrow, we find out. The decision hovered in the air, raw, terrifying, and full of possibility. Months later, the results came in, quietly, without spectacle. Emily opened the envelope in Robert's office, hands shaking just as they had the night everything began. And when she looked up, tears gathered not from shock but from relief. The truth didn't erase the past, but it gave them something new, a beginning they chose together, not one shaped by fear or silence. The restaurant added a small framed photo near the entrance. Emily and Robert signing their renewed partnership contract, both smiling with a calm they once believed impossible. And every night after closing, Emily would rest her hand on the frame before turning off the lights. A reminder of dignity, kindness, and how forgiveness can reshape the meaning of family. Astoria Court didn't just survive. It became a place where voices, every accent, every story, were celebrated. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of kindness, dignity, and family. And thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul.